My name is Colin, and for 7 years I believed generosity could become a bridge. I married Rebecca knowing she came with 2 daughters, Madison and Haley. I never expected them to call me Dad. I never demanded affection. I only wanted a place in their lives that felt honest. So I showed up. I paid the car insurance when Madison started driving. I added both girls to my cell phone plan. I covered dance classes, gym memberships, school trips, streaming subscriptions, gas money, shopping money, and every quiet emergency that appeared between paychecks. When Madison's car began making a grinding noise, I paid for the repairs. When Haley wanted equipment for an expensive new hobby, I bought it. Every time I opened my wallet, I told myself the same thing. One day, they will understand. One day, they will see that I stayed. But gratitude did not grow. Expectation did. The girls stopped asking whether I could help. They simply informed me what needed to be paid. Rebecca would place bills beside my coffee mug without saying much. A renewal notice. A receipt. A payment deadline. My name became less important than my bank account. The first cracks were small. Madison rolling her eyes when I asked where she was going. Haley ignoring me until she needed money. Both of them speaking warmly about their biological father, a man who appeared occasionally with promises and disappeared before responsibility arrived. I swallowed it. I kept paying. Then one evening, everything finally became clear. We were arguing about Madison's spending. She had ordered new furniture for her apartment without telling anyone. I said she needed to slow down, that adulthood meant learning the difference between wanting something and being able to afford it. She laughed. Not nervously. Cruelly. Haley looked at Rebecca and said, "Why does he care? He's just the guy who pays for everything." Madison nodded. Exactly. I looked at Rebecca. I waited for anger. For shock. For a single sentence defending the man who had carried half her family for years. She said nothing. That silence was worse than their words. Because the girls were young enough to be careless. Rebecca was not. I did not shout. I did not threaten anyone. I finished my dinner, washed my plate, and went upstairs. That night, I made a decision. I would stop paying for anything that was not truly my responsibility. I told no one. The mortgage remained paid. So did my share of the utilities, groceries, insurance on the house, and every obligation carrying my name. Everything else disappeared quietly. The girls' phone lines were removed from my account. Auto insurance was cancelled at the end of the billing period. Gym memberships vanished. Streaming services stopped working. Gas money stopped appearing. Shopping transfers ended. No speech. No warning. Just silence. The first explosion came 3 days later. Madison stood in the kitchen holding her phone, her face pale. Her furniture payment had failed. She had financed a sofa, dining set, bedroom furniture, and decorative pieces at an interest rate high enough to make my stomach turn. She had assumed I would pay it eventually because I always had. But the account was not in my name. It was not even in Rebecca's. For the first time, there was no one to rescue her. "You knew about this?" Rebecca asked me. "I knew she bought furniture. You're going to let her miss a payment?" I looked at Madison. She signed the contract. Madison stared at me as if I had betrayed her. That almost made me laugh. Almost. Within a week, the house changed. Madison started applying for part-time jobs, terrified that missed payments would destroy the credit she had barely begun building. Haley gave up her hobby, canceled plans with friends, and began writing down every expense in a notebook. Then Rebecca saw the real numbers. Not one bill. All of them. The insurance. The phones. The subscriptions. The repairs. The fees. The constant small withdrawals that had quietly drained thousands from me every year. Money became the only subject in the house. Every evening brought another argument. Madison blamed me. Haley blamed Madison. Rebecca blamed herself, then tried blaming me, then returned to blaming herself. I stayed calm. For years, I had carried the pressure alone. Now they could finally feel its weight. Madison found a job at a medical office. Haley started working weekends at a cafe. Rebecca canceled services we never needed and admitted that she had stopped noticing how much I provided because I never complained. Weeks passed before the apology came. We were sitting at the same table where everything had broken. Madison spoke first. "I thought you had to pay because you married Mom." Haley lowered her eyes. "I thought it didn't cost you anything." Then Rebecca looked at me. "I allowed them to treat your generosity like an obligation. I should have defended you. I should have taught them better." The words did not erase what happened. But they mattered. I agreed to help again carefully. Not automatically. Not endlessly. If Madison needed assistance, she had to show me her budget. If Haley wanted something expensive, she had to contribute. Every favor required responsibility. Every sacrifice required respect. I was no longer the wallet at the table. I was a man with boundaries. And they finally began treating me like one. I learned something painful from that house. A family cannot survive when one person gives and everyone else takes. Love is not measured by how much money a man can lose without complaining. Real family is built on mutual respect. Without it, generosity becomes servitude. The change did not happen all at once. People like to believe that an apology closes a wound. It does not. An apology only admits the blade existed. Healing begins afterward, in the long silence where everyone must decide whether they are willing to stop cutting. Madison kept her job at the medical office. At first, she complained about everything: the early shifts, the impatient patients, the manager who watched the clock, the ache in her feet after standing all day. I listened without rescuing her. That was new for both of us. Before, every hardship had become my emergency. A broken phone meant I bought another. An empty gas tank meant I transferred money. A bad decision meant I arrived with a check before consequences could reach her. Now I only listened. One evening, she came home exhausted and placed an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was the first furniture payment she had made entirely by herself. "I wanted you to see it," she said. I looked at the receipt, then at her. "Why?" She swallowed. "Because I understand now." There was no dramatic embrace. No music. No sudden warmth powerful enough to erase 7 years of being treated like a machine that produced money. But I nodded. And for the first time, she looked proud of something that had cost her effort instead of costing me money. Haley changed differently. She became quiet. Careful. She started comparing prices at the grocery store. She carried lunch to work instead of ordering food. The expensive equipment from her abandoned hobby remained boxed in the garage until she sold it online and placed the money into savings. One night she asked me to help her build a budget. Not give her money. Teach her. We sat at the dining table with a notebook between us. I showed her how to separate needs from wants, how to prepare for expenses before they became emergencies, how small monthly charges could bleed an account dry without anyone noticing. She stared at the final total for a long time. "You paid all this for us?" "For years. And we never even asked what it cost you." "No." Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. I respected that. Tears can be sincere, but they can also become another way of asking the wounded person to offer comfort. "I'm sorry, Colin," she whispered. This time, she used my name gently. It mattered more than Dad ever could have. Rebecca struggled the most. The girls had been careless because they had never learned the weight of money. Rebecca knew that weight. She had simply allowed me to carry it because my strength made her life easier. That truth sat between us every night. She began showing me every bill before making decisions. She canceled accounts she had forgotten existed. She took extra shifts and stopped assuming that my silence meant I was comfortable. But practical changes were easier than emotional ones. One night, after the girls had gone upstairs, she stood across from me in the kitchen. "Do you still love me?" she asked. The question sounded fragile. I wanted to give her the answer she needed. For years, that had been my instinct, to soften every truth until no one else had to feel pain. But softness had nearly destroyed me. I love you, I said. But I don't trust you the way I did. Her face tightened. I apologized. I know. What else can I do? Defend me when it costs you something. She looked away. That was the heart of it. Rebecca had loved me privately, when love required nothing difficult. But when her daughters mocked me, defending me would have meant risking their anger. So she sacrificed my dignity to preserve her comfort. I was afraid they would think I chose you over them, she admitted. And instead, you showed them they could disrespect me without losing anything. She cried then. I did not hold her. That may sound cruel. It was not. For once, I allowed her to sit with the pain her choices had created. Months passed. Madison paid off part of the furniture debt. Haley built an emergency fund. Rebecca became firmer, correcting them whenever old habits returned. The house grew calmer, though never innocent again. Broken trust does not return as it was. It returns with scars. I eventually restored the family phone plan, but both girls paid a portion. I helped Madison with a car repair after she saved half the cost. I covered one of Haley's classes because she had researched it, budgeted for it, and asked respectfully. Helping them felt different now. It was no longer tribute demanded from an outsider. It was support offered by choice. Still, there were nights when I remembered that sentence. He's just the guy who pays for everything. Sometimes I wondered whether their respect was real or merely the fear of losing my help again. I wondered whether Rebecca's loyalty had truly changed or whether she had only learned that my patience had limits. There are questions apologies cannot answer. Only time can. I stayed, but I did not return to the man I had been. That man believed love meant giving until nothing remained. He confused endurance with devotion and silence with strength. I buried him. The man who replaced him could still be generous. But he would never again purchase peace at the cost of his own dignity. Because respect given only while the bills are paid is not respect. It is dependence wearing a smile. For almost a year, I believed the worst was behind us. Madison kept working, Haley kept saving, and Rebecca learned to speak before her silence could wound me again. We looked repaired from the outside. Perhaps that was why I failed to notice how easily old habits could return. The test came on Madison's 23rd birthday. She wanted to celebrate at an expensive restaurant downtown. Rebecca suggested something smaller, but Madison insisted she had earned one special night after months of work and careful payments. I agreed. I even offered to cover dinner as my gift. Then she arrived with a surprise. Her biological father, Daniel, walked into the restaurant carrying a bouquet and wearing the smile of a man who expected applause merely for appearing. I had met him only twice. He had missed graduations, medical emergencies, birthdays, and every financial crisis that had landed in my lap. Yet Madison rose and embraced him. "Dad!" The word hit me harder than it should have. I reminded myself that blood had its own language. I had never demanded his title. Still, I watched Daniel sit at the head of the table while I was pushed toward the end, beside the kitchen doors, and something cold began moving through me. He told stories about Madison's childhood as if he had witnessed it. He exaggerated fishing trips that happened once. He spoke proudly of the woman she had become, never mentioning who repaired her car, carried her bills, or stayed awake when she was sick. Madison laughed at every story. Haley did too. Rebecca saw my face but said nothing. Again. When the check arrived, Daniel leaned back and patted his pockets theatrically. "I'd grab this, but I left my wallet in the car." Nobody believed him. The server placed the bill beside me. $780. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Madison smiled as though the arrangement were obvious. "Colin said dinner was his gift." I looked down at the total. Dinner from Madison had been my gift. Not imported wine for Daniel. Not appetizers ordered carelessly. Not meals for 6 friends she had invited without asking me. The old Colin would have paid. He would have swallowed the humiliation, smiled for the photographs, and driven home with his anger locked safely behind his teeth. That man was dead. I offered to pay for your dinner, I said. Not the entire table. Madison's smile vanished. You're seriously doing this here? I'm clarifying what I agreed to. Daniel laughed under his breath. Come on, man. It's her birthday. I turned toward him. Then perhaps her father should contribute. The table went still. His face changed first. The confidence slipped, revealing the same frightened emptiness I had seen in people who lived by assuming someone else would handle the consequences. Rebecca touched my arm. Colin, please. Not tonight. Those words reopened everything. Not tonight. That had always been her answer. Respect could wait. My dignity could wait. The truth could wait, as long as everyone else remained comfortable. I removed her hand. No. Tonight is exactly when this matters. Madison's eyes filled with anger. I thought you were past this. Past what? Punishing us with money. The accusation settled over me like ash. I had helped her again. I had supported her when she showed responsibility. I had tried to rebuild trust one careful act at a time. Yet the moment I established a limit, she called it punishment. That was when I understood. They had changed their behavior. But perhaps they had not changed their belief. Deep inside, they still thought my money belonged to them. I placed enough cash on the table to cover Madison's meal, my own, and the tip. Then I stood. Rebecca followed me outside. The night air was cold, and traffic hissed over wet pavement. You embarrassed her, she said. I looked through the restaurant window. Daniel had moved into my empty chair. Madison leaned toward him while Haley spoke rapidly, all of them united by the villainy of the man who refused to pay. No, I said. I disappointed her. There is a difference. She has worked so hard. So have I. It was one dinner. It is never one dinner, Rebecca. It is the belief beneath it. She folded her arms. What belief? That I exist to remove consequences. Rebecca went silent. There it was again. That terrible refuge. I drove home alone. Near midnight, Madison entered the house and threw the receipt onto the counter. Daniel had disappeared before the remaining bill was settled. Her friends divided the cost, and she had paid more than she could afford. He made me look stupid, she whispered. I knew she meant Daniel. But when she raised her eyes, I saw the greater wound. She had finally compared us without sentiment. One man had brought flowers and stories. The other had brought years of sacrifice and a boundary she hated. I kept hoping he would become like you, she admitted. The confession surprised me. Then why did you treat him like the father and me like the wallet? Her face collapsed. Because I knew you would stay. Those 6 words contained the entire history of our family. Daniel was cherished because he could vanish. I was exploited because I was dependable. Rebecca stood in the doorway behind her, crying quietly. Haley lowered her head. None of them tried to defend what had happened. For once, silence told the truth. I did not leave that night, but something inside me withdrew again. Trust is not restored by one apology, nor destroyed by one dinner. It is measured in moments when choosing respect becomes inconvenient. They had failed that test. Maybe they would pass the next one. Maybe there would not be a next one. The conversation after Madison's birthday stayed with me for weeks. Not because voices were raised. Not because anyone slammed doors. Because for the first time, nobody could pretend they did not understand. Life returned to its routine. Rebecca went to work each morning before sunrise. Madison balanced her office job with evening classes. Haley continued working weekends while finishing school. I returned to my own schedule, leaving before daylight and often arriving home after dinner. The house became quieter than I had ever known it. Sometimes silence is peaceful. sometimes it is simply exhaustion. One Saturday morning I walked into the garage and found Madison staring at her car. The engine was making a sharp knocking sound every time she started it. A year earlier she would have handed me the keys without asking whether I had plans. She would have expected me to solve the problem before Monday. Instead, she looked uncomfortable. "I already called 2 repair shops," she said. "The cheaper one has better reviews." I nodded. "Good. They think it'll cost around $1,800. I waited. She took a deep breath. "I'm not asking you to pay." Those words mattered more than she realized. "What are you asking?" She smiled nervously. "Could you come with me?" I don't know enough about cars to know if they're being honest. I looked at her for several seconds. Finally, I picked up my jacket. "Let's go." The mechanic inspected the engine while we waited in the office. He explained every repair, every replacement, every labor charge. Madison listened carefully, asking questions instead of looking at me for answers. When the estimate was finished, she reached for her debit card. The payment emptied almost everything she had saved. Driving home, either of us spoke for several miles. Finally, she broke the silence. "A year ago I would have expected you to cover it." "I know. I didn't even realize how unfair that was. You weren't the only one." She looked through the windshield. I think Mom believed it too. I couldn't argue. Rebecca had never demanded my money with harsh words. She had done something quieter, more dangerous. She had allowed generosity to become routine. Routine eventually becomes entitlement. That evening Rebecca asked how much the repair had cost. Madison answered before I could. I paid. Rebecca looked surprised. "You had enough?" "I've been saving." Rebecca smiled proudly. Then she looked at me. "I guess she's growing up," I answered carefully. "No. She's accepting responsibility. Those aren't always the same thing." Rebecca understood exactly what I meant. Later that night she joined me on the back porch. "I owe you another apology." "You've already apologized." "Not for this." She folded her hands together. "I let the girls believe providing was easy because I never wanted them worrying about money. And instead they never respected it." "Yes." She lowered her head. "I also stopped respecting it." The honesty caught me off guard. "I got comfortable," she continued. "Every problem disappeared because you handled it. I stopped asking whether it was fair." The words hurt. Not because they were cruel. Because they were true. "I loved taking care of you," I admitted. "I know. But somewhere along the way, taking care of everyone became the only reason I seemed valuable." Rebecca's eyes filled. "I never wanted you to feel that way." "You didn't have to want it." She nodded slowly. "I just had to allow it." The wind carried leaves across the yard between us. Neither of us moved. Finally she reached for my hand. This time I let her. Not because everything had been repaired. Because rebuilding always begins with small decisions. Weeks later Haley received her first performance bonus at work. She walked into the living room carrying a grocery bag. "I bought dinner," she announced. Rebecca laughed. "You didn't have to." "I know." Haley turned toward me. "I wanted to." Inside the bag were steaks, vegetables, fresh bread, and my favorite pie from the bakery downtown. Nothing extravagant. Nothing expensive. But every dollar had come from money she earned herself. While we cooked together she quietly said something I will never forget. "When everything was free, I never noticed who was paying." She looked embarrassed. "Now every dollar has a name." I stood there holding the cutting board, realizing those simple words meant more than every apology that had come before. Perhaps people cannot appreciate sacrifice until they make sacrifices of their own. Perhaps that is simply how adulthood begins. The meal that evening tasted different. Not because the food was better. Because nobody at the table assumed someone else existed to carry them. For the first time since I married Rebecca, I did not feel like the family wallet. I felt like part of the family itself. It had taken years. It had nearly cost us everything. And even then, I knew trust would always remain fragile. Respect is easier to lose than to earn. Once broken, it demands proof again and again. Maybe that is not unfair. Maybe that is simply the price of building a real family instead of financing the illusion of one.